Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk, the first playoff edition of the 2024 season. This is, of course, presented by Forefathers Organics. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for the Batavia Daily and Livingston County's news. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all the comings and goings from Orchard Park, thanks to our friends at Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, before we welcome in our guest on this evening's podcast, Bruce Nolan of the Bruce Exclusive Podcast, we'd like to first recap the Bills' 31-7 drubbing of the Denver Broncos here at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park. Bills entered this game as an 8.5, 9-point favorite, depending on where you got the spread on your local sports book or perhaps online. But the Bills finished with a 24-point victory, absorbing a fast start from the Broncos. A 43-yard touchdown pass from Bo Nix to Troy Franklin got things started in a big way for Denver, gave them an early 7-0 lead. But after that, it was all Bills. The defense came alive, limiting Nix and the offense to under 230 yards of total offense and shutting the Denver Broncos out over the final 57 minutes of play here this evening. That included a missed field goal on part of the Broncos. The defensive effort highlighted the win, but offensively, Buffalo was propelled by running back James Cook, finished with 120 yards rushing on 23 carries. He became the first Bills player to surpass 100 yards rushing in a playoff game since Thurman Thomas all the way back in 1995. So some of those drought memories still ringing true here, even though the Bills have made it to the Divisional Round 5 straight seasons. This their first 100-yard rusher in the postseason since those Super Bowl years in the early to mid-90s. Running back Ty Johnson also had a big day, 44 yards rushing on 9 carries. He also hauled in a 24-yard touchdown reception of the highlight reel variety from Josh Allen, who bought time on a 4th and 1 and delivered it low to Johnson, but he was able to slide down, scoop it up before it hit the turf. Just an incredible play, one that the officials had to review, but the play stood, and it was just another of a list of great plays put forth by Ty Johnson this season. Obviously, everybody remembers that game against the Detroit Lions, but another big one here today. Josh Allen has consistently called him the best third down running back in the league, and James Cook, after the game, said he does a lot of the dirty work, doesn't get a lot of the praise, but certainly a big factor in the success of the Bills' running game this season. And that running game has been a big factor in the Bills' overall success as an offense this season, being able to balance it out. More on that later on. Allen had a solid day, but certainly not a vintage Josh Allen performance. Started a little bit slow due to the fact that the Bills were relying on that running game, but he did work his way to a fine performance, finishing 20 of 26, 272 yards and 2 touchdowns. The other touchdown was a catch and run from Curtis Samuel, somebody who the Bills brought in this past offseason. Has been very quiet all season, except for 2 games when they've really needed him, and this game being the latest example of that. 55-yard score for him, broke a couple of tackles en route to the end zone. He finished as the team's leading receiver with 3 receptions for 68 yards. Just continuing to build upon that everybody eats mentality that the Bills have instilled this season. Like I said, with the balance, more on the everybody eats later on when we bring in Bruce Nolan. On special teams, I thought coming into this game, Denver was going to have the advantage with Marvin Mims in the return game and Will Lutz, one of the most consistent kickers in the league this season. But Lutz misses a field goal from 50 yards, and the Broncos also elect not to try a field goal from 56, deciding to punt it instead. Lutz just made a 55-yarder a few weeks ago, albeit that was in an indoor stadium against the Los Angeles Chargers. But not a good day for Will Lutz. Didn't hear much from Marvin Mims. A nice job by the Bills keeping him quiet. And on the other side of things, Tyler Bass came through with a nice day, made a couple of kicks. They were relative chip shots, but kept the Bills on schedule. And when things were tight there at the beginning of the game, Bass allowed them to grab that early lead before blowing things open as the second half wore along. And as far as the return game for the Bills, no Brandon Codrington in this game. He was listed as inactive with that hamstring injury. Khalil Shakir filled in for Codrington, fielded all 4 punts from the Broncos cleanly. Decent return on one of them, breaking a couple tackles at the point of the catch. So nice day for Shakir in that regard as well. And finally, on the defensive side of the ball, Matt Milano was the star for me. I know that Greg Rousseau came away with that sack late in the game. The secondary played very well against the Broncos receivers, but Matt Milano showing some vintage Matt Milano in this game, flying sideline to sideline, namely on that sack of Bo Nix near the sideline, and then on the end around for Marvin Mims in the first half, able to stop him for either no gain, a loss, or short yardage. I can't remember which of the 3 it was, but Milano seems to be rounding into form, and boy, that could come right at the right time for the Bills. His instincts have been there, as I've said on previous podcasts, but I think he's been a step slow and seemed to regain some of that first step speed today against the Broncos. Damar Hamlin had an interception that was overturned. Like I said, Greg Rousseau with a sack, but really not many standout performances from this game defensively. It was just a solid effort all around. It was well game planned by Bobby Babich and company. One minor flaw, well, it could have been a major flaw, the deep ball to Franklin. And we talked with Rasul Douglas after the game, said it was just a miscommunication between he and Taylor Rapp on the play. But strong day for the defense and silenced a lot of the critics coming into this game that were worried if the Bills defense could shut down even a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. I know they'll have a much taller task next week against the Baltimore Ravens, but a good performance from the defense. They limit Denver to 2 of 9 conversion on third down. So an overall successful day for that side of the ball. All right, so before we bring in Bruce, let's thank our sponsor once more, Forefathers Organics in Dansville. At Forefathers Organics, their mission is to liberate, educate, and innovate with the highest quality CBD and hemp-derived products for your mind, body, and soul so you can live happy and free. Visit them at 87 Franklin Street in Dansville, online at forefathersorganics.com, or call them at 585-335-2223 to learn more about the products they offer. All right, we welcome in our guest here, Bruce Nolan of the Bruce Exclusive Podcast. It's nice to have you, Bruce, on this post-game edition of the pod. We've had you before, but not immediately following a game. I'm ready for some hot takes, my friend.
If you're looking for hot takes, you have come to the incredibly wrong place, Mr. Brasky. I cannot possibly tell you how lukewarm my takes have historically been, but it's nice to be agreeing to a post-game pod and then having the Bills win. Like, that's ideally what we want to be, because I don't really show up on a lot of post-game pods. And when you kind of sign up for it and you kind of put your stamp down, you just kind of hope the Bills win so you don't have to deal with angry people in the comments, or as angry people in the comments, I suppose.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And it certainly makes it a little bit more fun for us to discuss as well, not all doom and gloom. Instead, preparing for this next big game against the Baltimore Ravens. But before we look ahead to the Ravens, why don't we discuss today's game? And we'll start with just the balance from the Bills offense. I know it was a fine performance from the defense. They shut them out over the final 57 minutes, but really impressed with how the offense got things going today in the running game. And that balance that Joe Brady has created for this offense has just worked wonders throughout the season. Asked Allen about it after the game, and he said, that's Joe Brady doing Joe Brady things. And I think that rings incredibly true. Also, the offensive line deserves plenty of credit. But between Josh Allen and James Cook, what those two have done together, creating that balance along with Joe Brady at the controls, has just been incredible to watch this season. And it showed up again today.
It did. And I think that this is the type of thing that Sean McDermott had in mind when he kept talking about complementary football. I know that was a really kind of a buzzword for a lot of years, and people were thinking he wants to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. But this is not unusual. If you go all the way back to the way that Sean McDermott talked about complementary football when he was hired, like in his introductory press conference and immediately after when he was talking about the way that he wants to win games, he says you win games in the trenches. And when he says complementary football, it means my offensive line is performing at such a high level that I can just do what I want to do. I don't have to do something because my offensive line is liability. If you look at the way that Miami Dolphins have been playing football over the last couple of years, that's an example of what you have to do when your offensive line isn't the way that it needs to be, right? You need to be able to smoke and mirrors your way through things. You need to be able to throw a lot of tunnel screens, like literally all the tunnel screens to your running backs and wide receivers. And so when Sean McDermott has an offensive line that's playing at the level that the Buffalo Bills offensive line is, he can just be comfortable knowing that if you want to call a run on 1st and 10, there's a chance you pick up 5 or 7 yards and put yourself in good position. So you don't have to do anything. You get to choose things knowing that you have equal chances of success and just getting positive yards and getting the ball ahead of the sticks, no matter what you choose. And I think that's been a kind of you mentioned it in your intro, right? James Cook, first 100-yard rusher for the Bills in the playoffs since Thurman Thomas. Like, that's meaningful. That's really meaningful. The Bills have played a lot of games over the last couple of years, a lot of playoff games. They're the only team in the NFL aside from the Chiefs who have won a playoff game every single year for the last 5 years. And still they don't have a 100-yard rusher until today. And it's because this is what Sean McDermott wanted. He wanted the ability to be able to say, you know what? The Broncos pass defense is really good. The Broncos rush defense is less good. I can take advantage of your weakness because it's not going to be exposing one of mine. And I think that that's something that you really think about when you think about complementary football. And we got a chance to see it a little bit today.
And boy, this offensive line is, as you said, and as I've said before, is just really at the forefront of that well-balanced success of this offense and just the ignition in the running game this season. And Deion Dawkins perhaps having as much to do with it as anybody else. Didn't get the All-Pro nod this season. He said after the game that he was relatively disappointed. He couldn't hide it, wasn't going to sugarcoat it, said it was a goal of his, said that he's reinventing new ways to play offensive line. And I can't argue with his displeasure not being honored with an All-Pro nod. I thought he deserved it. I thought he was one of the top players at his position. But, hey, we'll live to fight another day on that. With Dawkins, though, how about that play with him and Cook, the 12.5 extra yards created after contact, and I think it was Brandon Jones, what I call the snowmobile with Deion Dawkins just pulling James Cook down the field. That really just embodies, I think, the mentality that this offense and this team really fulfills week in and week out. Just all for one, one for all. They see somebody striving for those extra yards, and Dawkins just picking them up and carrying him with him. Such an impressive effort from both of those on that play.
Yeah, and that's something that you look at offensive linemen, and if there's any position in the NFL that has the right to just kind of take it off for a minute, it's offensive line. Because unlike defensive linemen who get to rotate in and out and get fresh pass rushers in the fourth quarter, it's that same left tackle, right? Ideally, play 1 and play 62 have the exact same left tackle. Yeah. And so if there's ever a position that can be excused for just like, oh, you know what? The ball's 6 or 7 yards away from me. I'm just going to put my hands on my hips and kind of collect my breath for the next play. It's offensive linemen. And so when you see them running down the field to block downfield for players who are, coming out the backside, when you see them getting in there and pushing it, it really is a choice, right? It's a choice to dig deep. It's a choice to give it that extra effort because nobody would blame them for just not. Right? The ball's past me. It's 6 or 7 yards down the field. I'm 330 pounds, man. I'm not going to do this thing where I'm going to run 6 or 7 yards down the field and start pushing on somebody, and no one could blame them. But they do it anyway. And so that's one of the reasons why a player like Dawkins, with the vibes that he brings to this team, is so important, because he generates that kind of energy and he generates that kind of, that's a huge sort of buff. You could feel it in the stadium when that happened. You could feel the fans, and it's an extra 12 yards. And even if it was an extra 5, they still would have lit up. And that energy is infectious. And I think that's really the type of energy that Deion Dawkins has brought to this team since he came on board. I do hope that at some point he gets the recognition, aside from the, like ball knowers, like the people who watch offensive line for a living, the Brandon Thorns of the world, the Mitchell Schwartzes of the world. They're all like, man, Deion Dawkins is really good. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the NFL populace is like, he's fine. Whatever. So I hope that one day he gets the credit that he probably deserves. But saying that Deion Dawkins at this point is top 5 left tackle in the NFL is not hyperbolic.
And he was pretty broken up about it, I think, judging from my perspective. You don't see him really stray from that just boisterous personality that we see from Deion Dawkins on a regular basis. But when he was asked about getting perceived snubbed from the All-Pro, he really got serious, and you could just see it in his eyes that he was really disappointed he didn't earn that this season. I think his performance this season, not only this season, but his progression over the years, and like he said, just kind of the way he's reinventing different ways, that snatch trap move that he does, he's really had that take on a life of its own. So it's too bad for Dawkins, but I think it'll all be good if they're able to advance past the Ravens and get to the Super Bowl this season. Beyond James Cook, though, in the running game, Ty Johnson continues to produce as a third down running back. At the beginning of the season, more so brought in for his expertise in pass protection. But since that Lions game, it seems he's really been utilized more and more heavily within this offense. And who can blame Joe Brady? He just continues to make plays, and not only plays that are there for him to make, he continues to create highlight reel plays like that catch that he made in the end zone today. So Ty Johnson, we spoke with him after the game, and he gets those limited opportunities, and James Cook said it, doesn't get a lot of praise for the dirty work that he does, but Ty Johnson just says that confidence that he has in himself allows him to produce on those limited opportunities. And he's a player that Sean McDermott has to absolutely love. Soft-spoken, goes out there, puts his hard hat on, does his job in every phase of the game, and just comes out on the other end with performances like he had tonight.
One of my favorite Ty Johnson statistics is that last year, amongst running backs with enough carries to qualify, Ty Johnson led the NFL in rushing success rate. This year, he has an 8.7 average distance of target on his catches, on his targets. I mean, it's just like, this is wide receiver level
for a
stuff,
running back,
right? For a running back, right? To put that in perspective, average distance of target for running backs is usually in the twos, right? 8.7. Like, I joke around on social media that Ty Johnson is the wide receiver one that was promised, right? Like all off season long.
Think of him like a wide receiver. Think of him like a tight end.
Yeah, it's really a joy for me. And I think one of the things that Ty Johnson's success has shown you is that it goes back to the offensive line again. You know, if you have an offensive line who's getting the kind of push that they do, then you can get somebody that was cast off from another team. And if they fit the system and they understand the blocking schemes and they have a good head on their shoulders for understanding where the blocks are going to develop, running man, running zone, then you can come in and have a real, like a productive day. You know, this is like the second most run Ty Johnson's ever gotten in his career. 2024 for the Buffalo Bills, 2021 for the Jets. Like, this is like the most run he's gotten. And yet over and over and over again in big moments, down the field to running backs is something that the Bills offense, you saw it against Detroit. You saw it again today. The Ray Davis famously making plays down the field. Yeah. Like, this is something that Joe Brady has kind of concocted as sort of an answer to man-heavy teams, which is not something we saw under any recent Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. No. Against man-heavy teams, he's like, listen, man, we'll just throw the ball down the field to Ty Johnson. You're like, I'm sorry, you're going to what now? And you're like, yes, no, you heard me. We're going to throw it down the field to Ty Johnson, because you might say, well, you're not going to get the same level of ball skills from a running back. And I'm going to say, you're not going to get the same amount of coverage skills from the linebacker covering him 20 yards down the field either. So I'll take my guy over your guy. And it's not in a vacuum. It's in comparison to coverage. And so when you look at Ty Johnson, you go, okay, yeah, sure, it's a running back, but it's a running back on a linebacker 20 yards down the field. The linebacker's in the same spot. They're running down the field going, what am I doing 20 yards down the field? What's happening here? So it's a wonderful story. I think that Ty Johnson has, in back-to-back years, proven his prowess running the ball and receiving the ball. And I think that, ironically enough, this is going to come up in the offseason when the do we resign James Cook conversations come up. It's going to come up.
Yep, and you still have the rookie Ray Davis, who's performed well this season. He exited this game with a head injury, a scary sight on that pass that Josh Allen overthrew him down the seam, got blasted, the personal foul called on the Broncos. He immediately headed to the locker room and looked a little bit wobbly walking back to the locker room from my vantage point. So hoping for the best for Ray Davis. Certainly the Bills need all hands on deck moving forward, but you speak on Ty Johnson and the Bills' willingness to throw deep down the field to the running back. I think it's just emblematic of the any means necessary style of play that they've employed this season. Curtis Samuel, the team's leading receiver today, that 55-yard touchdown catch. Maybe this is what they were saving Curtis Samuel for. He looked like a spring chicken out there after he's dealt with injuries all season long. It's just a credit to Joe Brady continuing to get these guys involved, even players like Samuel, who they've struggled to get involved all season long. They haven't given up on it, and he finds his way to shine when it matters most today against the Denver Broncos.
That was one of the big questions coming out of the Texans game, because what you saw against the Texans was you saw a team that was like, listen, I just don't think your people can beat us across the board. And that was the big fear for a lot of Bills fans coming into this year, is that you didn't really go out and get yourself a man beater in the draft. Keon Coleman is not known for his separation ability against man coverage. And then you lost someone who was your go-to guy against man coverage and Stephon Diggs, and that's a big swing. And so you're like, okay, what's the answer going to be? And then those fears were sort of realized against the Houston Texans. The man answers weren't working. And then the Buffalo Bills went up against the Detroit Lions, another man-heavy defense, and just lit them up like a Christmas tree. So one of the questions coming into this week was, okay, you have another man-heavy defense. Denver Broncos top 10 in cover 0 usage, cover 1 usage in the league. And you go, okay, you heard Josh Allen yell it out, 0-0-0 against the Broncos. He knew when it was coming, but are your answers there? Is Joe Brady in his bag against man coverage, and can your people win? Curtis Samuel was one of those pieces. You remember, backed up in his own end zone late in the game, Josh Allen threw a pass and missed Curtis Samuel, who was open. And one of our big conversations was, you have a man beater in Curtis Samuel. You didn't use him against a man-heavy defense, and then you lost. And so this week, you go up another one. Curtis Samuel has one of his best games as a Buffalo Bill, and you go, okay, there it is. Like, there the answers were cooking. The players were cooking. Everybody eats this great as long as you have very specific roles for very specific people in very specific moments. And the Buffalo Bills had it today against the Broncos.
It could be just in time to get Curtis Samuel cooking for this matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Like I said earlier, they're going to need all hands on deck for that one. Dawson Knox, almost 5 wild card games in a row with a touchdown. Josh Allen throws it just behind him. Just missed what would have been an incredible streak. I think he's got the NFL record. I think he's the only player in history to catch a touchdown in his team's 4 consecutive wild card appearances or something like that. I saw it tweeted out. But I think that's about it for the offense, offensive line, running game, passing game, all clicking here today. But the defense really clicking outside of that one breakdown with Rasul Douglas and Taylor Rapp, which Douglas chalked up to just a miscommunication between the two. It was just a solid performance. I said it earlier. I don't think there were a lot of standout performances. It wasn't like anybody dominated. No takeaways in this game. Damar Hamlin's interception gets changed to an incompletion. Greg Rousseau with a late sack. Von Miller had a few good rushes, but not much from the pass rush early. Just what did you see from the defense? You see it similar as I did. It was just kind of an overall sound performance, which I thought was really schemed well by Bobby Babich. I thought the game plan that they put forth in today's game worked nearly to perfection if it wasn't for that early bomb.
Yes, sound is what you need when you're not getting explosive defensive plays.
Yeah.
When you're not getting a bunch of penetration, you're not getting a bunch of pressure, you're not getting a bunch of turnovers. What you need sound. And I think that one of the things you're going to see is you're going to see the Buffalo Bills back 7 have to help out the front 4. We talk a lot about pass rush helping coverage. We don't talk enough about coverage helping pass rush. One of the best ways you can go about helping your front 4 is to make your quarterback opposing you hold the ball past his first and second read, because usually that's past 2.5 seconds. The average time to pressure in the NFL is 2.5 seconds. So if you can make someone hold the ball longer than that, you've got a chance. We saw that late in the game when Gregory Rousseau collected a sack, right? That was absolutely a coverage sack. And without dominating one-on-one individual players up front, and players like Ed Oliver not showing up as well as you probably hope that they will. And Von Miller, I think, probably had the best game pass rushing for the Buffalo Bills. And I mean, that's great. You've been saving them for there, but still you'd like to see more from the front 4. I think you're going to need to see the back 7. Thankfully, Matt Milano's rounding into form, it appears. You're going to need to see the back 7 help out the front 4, especially next week against Baltimore.
Yeah, expand upon that because I thought the same thing with Milano. The speed I thought was there today, sideline to sideline, that sack with Bo Nix, and then able to chase down Marvin Mims on that end around. I said it at the beginning of the postseason. I think the X factor for the Bills this postseason is if Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard can turn into that elite linebacker duo that everyone expected them to be at the outset of the season. Obviously, of course, before Milano went down with the bicep injury. But it's been a long road back for him, and an aging player going through two significant injuries. It's going to take him a while, I think, to get back to game speed, but it looks like he really could be getting back to that game speed. And if you have Matt Milano near all-pro Matt Milano at this point of the postseason going into this matchup with Lamar Jackson, boy, that could be really, really big.
Yeah, it really could. I think one of the things that you need from Matt Milano is Matt Milano has historically been able to make up for an inflated missed tackle number because he's able to generate explosives. And if you're not getting them from your front four, you need them from your back seven. And having Matt Milano be able to generate a big tackle for loss, be able to get his hands into the throwing windows, be able to understand where he's supposed to be in coverage and make a play on the ball, that makes up for the fact that because of the lack of ideal length and the fact that he is known to miss some tackles. He has been over the course of his entire career. But what you hope is you're not getting Matt Milano back with the missed tackles, but without the explosives. And what you saw today was you saw him generate some explosives. And so those type of things where if you can get those against the Baltimore Ravens and you can put Lamar into pure drop back situations on 3rd and 12, right? That puts you in a better position. So ultimately, I think that if you're able to generate 5-7 yards from Derrick Henry on first down, the Bills are going to be in for a long day because it's always going to be mixing it up. It's always going to be struggling with, okay, is there going to be an RPO here? Is there going to be, you saw the dots, I'm sure, that were making their way around social media where Lamar Jackson, fakes the handoff to Derrick Henry and starts to go left. And all of a sudden the entire defense flows to Lamar. And it turns out, oh no, Henry actually does have the ball. And he just, oopsie daisy runs to the end zone. And so you have to put them in positions where that doesn't matter as much. And so to do that, you're not going to be able to just man up and stop Derrick Henry for 0 yards on every first and second run. You're going to need to generate negative plays. So to do that, we need vintage Milano.
Yeah, I think also something that you need that's been missing throughout much of the season is that steady communication at the center of the defense. And I think you have that now with Milano, Bernard, and Taron Johnson now performing weeks at a time. Not only on the practice field, but on the game field. I think that's starting to round into form as well. I don't know if the communication has been where it's needed to be this season with all the changeover. I think that may have been one of the reasons for Terrell Bernard's slight step back this season. He's also dealt with some injuries, but him being the air traffic controller in the center of the defense and having to worry about getting everybody set up and a lot of these new pieces, particularly directly behind him at the safety position, I think that may have taken a little bit away from his ability to play free and make those splash plays that we saw from him last season. And getting Matt Milano back in the lineup at full efficacy or near full efficacy, and with Taron Johnson alongside him as well, and that trio communicating with one another near the line of scrimmage, I think that's going to work wonders for the Bills this week as well. It's going to be a chess match against Lamar Jackson and this Ravens offense led by Todd Monken. Derrick Henry was incredible this past game on Saturday. So it's really going to be a great matchup. And I guess that's where we'll go to next. I asked a few Bills players in the locker room after the game just how much they were looking forward to this rematch against the Ravens. And understandably so, they played it down, just said they haven't thought about it much. But Deion Dawkins gave me a little bit. He said he just loves playing good on good football. And that's exactly what this is going to be. At least it's billing up to be. This coming week. And Sean McDermott perhaps said it best. This is what everybody's been waiting for.
He's right. It's what everybody on social media has been waiting for. That's for sure, because the blood is not good between Bills fans and Ravens fans this year.
I got into the mix a little bit last night, kind of trolling the Ravens fans with Derrick Henry's explosive performance and him outgaining Lamar Jackson in the second half, all in good fun for me. I don't know if the Ravens fans had as much fun with it.
I think that whoever wins is going to be the one who has fun. It's that simple.
Yes.
I think because if you think about it this way, the only way that this ends up with nobody having anything to dunk on, right, is if the exact same quarterback who is on the winning team also ends up winning the MVP. Otherwise, everyone's going to have something. It's going to be, yeah, you beat us, but you lost to the Chiefs in the championship and our guy won MVP, so we still win, or whatever it is. And so that's going to be funny because, the goalposts, no one is ever intellectually consistent on the internet or in arguments. That's just the way it works, right? So everything, your team is better than my team now, but my team has historically been better. So I'm going to bring up Super Bowls. But if my team hasn't historically been better, then I'm going to bring up the last time that we played. So it's all like this nice little flow chart. I have it outlined. I'll share it with you sometime. It's a really good thing. It's How to Argue on the Internet by Bruce Nolan. And you can capture people in their lovely intellectual dishonesty. It's a good time.
I love it. I've been dealing with it for years as a Yankees fan. I've been dealing with those arguments ever since 2009. It's always, yeah, but we have the championships, and then the Red Sox fans, yeah, but you haven't won lately. So I'm sure we'll see a little bit of that this weekend. But you're right. It's going to be all about this MVP discourse all week long. And the one thing that you got to hope for is if the Bills are able to make it through the Ravens, that they don't. Let me find an appropriate phrase here. I was just about to use a phrase I don't think is PG. You don't want them to use up all their goodwill or all their great performance against the Ravens, because you're still probably going to have the Kansas City Chiefs awaiting in the AFC Championship game. And boy, are they going to have fun this week if they're able to work their way past the Houston Texans, just watching the Bills and the Ravens beat up on each other. But yeah, you got to take care of business in this one, but still there's more left to be done after this. It's not about this win individually. I know that the team has to focus on this, but at the same time, you can't, like I said, overextend yourself in this game. You gotta stay the course.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where if you don't open your bag of tricks, right, then you lose the game. You're going to be wishing you had. Right. And if you open your entire bag of tricks and you win the game, and then you don't have anything left for the Chiefs or the Texans, whoever gets there, you're like, well, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But to me, listen, the bag needs to be empty, like when you're done. Because this is the best Ravens team that the Buffalo Bills have faced in the playoffs. This is not the same team that had Lamar Jackson throw 101-yard pick six with Taron Johnson. This is not that same team. This is a different team. And there's a reason why they're dominating the way that they're dominating against a lot of teams. There's a reason why they have an MVP favorite. There's a reason why, Derrick Henry has 1,900 yards. And this is the best Ravens team the Bills have faced. So to me, it's going to be one of those, listen, you got to play like there's no tomorrow, because if you lose, there's not.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. It's easy for me to say from the outside looking in that you really got to keep an eye on the Chiefs during this game, but at the same time, you got to stay in the moment, work your way past, or else you won't have an opportunity at the Chiefs. And I think the big turnaround for the Ravens this season has been their defense. I think that goes without saying, just what their defense has transformed into. You saw it in the first half yesterday against Pittsburgh. Gave up some points in the second half when they were up 21-0, but this defense becoming what it is, really complementing the offensive side of the ball, has made them quite the formidable opponent, and I expect they will be as much this coming weekend. When do you expect that game to take place? I think it'll be the 6:30 game or 4:30 game on Sunday?
Yeah, one would think it would be the later game on Sunday, because I think of all the matchups that you have potentially looking at yourself next week, it's the one you would want to put in what you would consider to be the traditional prime time or close to traditional prime time spot, because I think it's the one that is going to generate the most buzz nationally, regardless of what happens as a result of the NFC games. So for me, if I'm the NFL, I want to put it in the spot I think I'm going to get the most eyes, and it's probably a Sunday evening game.
All right, Bruce, I appreciate you joining us for this post-game podcast, and hopefully we can get you back on soon, and hopefully the Bills can work their way to another win next week over the Ravens, and we can keep this season alive. But like I said, Bruce, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you and everybody else next time.